factories.
I'm very proud that Bloomberg or Washington Post. Sorry, I forgot she's no longer.
Yeah,
at
she's
Bloomberg.
upgraded. Yeah.
Washington Post has hired Dr. William Gohl.
Prescription drug prices. It was the Jews were the ones who were responsible.
The Jews are ones not be blamed for nothing.
Yeah.
But no, she's just she's like leading a trail of breadcrumbs into the enchanted forest, so you could just get lost there forever. Be like, well, yeah, if I want to get a lamb farm, okay, and then what about that extra? What about the car payment? And by the end of it, you just don't even know what your name is.
I have to say, like, McArdle's like affectation, I guess, has worked on me sometimes because it's just like we really do beat up on this shitty writing so much, and she's terrible. She's just a fucking hapless. Like in her life, she's like a hapless dope. She has like a succession of like partners and husbands who just like play.
She only had one husband.
Well, she had a
It's a gamer husband
before that who
It's
also
the same
didn't
guy.
like her, and then this guy who just plays World of Warcraft all day. And she just wakes up feeling nothing and then panic at that nothing. And all she can do is just like buy mixers or some shit that use like a quartz tip so you can make a finer type of cookie dough or whatever. And it just like, it is sad to see someone's life just so nakedly pointless and they're so clearly unhappy. But then you just read this and you're like, man, she's just fucking terrible. She's such a shit person. She is so dog shit as a human being.
Well, she doesn't care. I mean, remember the Grenfell thing? It's all like horrible things happen. Things that shock the conscience and soul and make people
needless suffering.
And the thing about that kind of thing is it makes people think, what can we do to stop this? And her job is to get in between you and your outrage and say,
exactly,
no, you shouldn't be outraged about this. And that's her job. That's her fucking job.
Like,
they put that her fucking corn blancher in her fucking.
And you know what,
kitchen with
Matt? This is exactly the same move that she does in the Grenfell column, which is like you have a thing that shocks the conscious, pointless, needless suffering and cruelty that happens because of greed.
Yes,
and no other reason but the greed of private actors.
Capitalist drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Profit, yeah.
She gets in there and says, "I know you may think it would be good if we did something about that, but what if I were to tell you that in doing something about that, there's a sort of butterfly effect that will create an even worse scenario that will be lead to even more suffering than what exists now.
No drugs for anyone."
Yeah, exactly. But she goes on here. She says, "Do you still open the sheep farm?
Shut up!
You could cut the budget and maybe still eke out a living.
Oh, God.
When you're making a new investment, I'm reading this whole thing. I'm reading this whole thing. You could cut the budget and maybe still eke out a living. But when you're making a new investment, the question isn't how can I make my income match my expenses, but is this the best use of my time and money? Most of us want to do more than eke out a living. If government squeezes the profit out of a business, we're not going to go into that business. We'll do something else. That's how pharmaceutical firms think about research and development, not as something they must do, which they will support by economizing elsewhere, but as something they would like to do if the investment pays better than doing something else, such as executing stock buybacks. It's also how people buying biotech stocks or lending money to pharmaceutical firms think about their activities. And so, if the returns on those investments are squeezed, fewer investments will be made.
It's almost like the fucking profit motive is in direct conflict with human welfare.
How about we just nationalize all pharmaceutical firms and run them as public concerns?
Oh, wait a minute. No, because the only thing that makes people develop new medicines is profit motive. Those scientists in those labs at the National Institute of Health, they've got dollar signs in their head, which is, of course, why fucking Cuba, which has a totally nationalized healthcare system and is also an impoverished island under fucking economic embargo for 60 years, cured cancer or cured AIDS in fetuses and has a fucking a cancer vaccine. They were able to pull this shit together without having an industry that depends on like taking a bunch of fucking like general practitioners from Omaha, taking them out to steak dinners and then giving them all lap dances at Scores.
Okay, I hear what you're saying, and it is a valid point. But imagine, if you will, it was enchilada night at your house. But someone made a little oopsie daisy and forgot to buy the soft taco shells. Now, you could make it with hard taco shells, but if my husband, who hasn't made eye contact with me in 6 months, he forgot where I put my $35,000 tortilla maker, then I just have to completely pointlessly meander through life at the behest of the Bohemian Grove and reptilians and then I just die a pointless existence, having never really been loved or loved anyone. And then you can't get your enchiladas.
But there's a fundamental conflict. Like, she's framing this of the profit motive is what gives people the incentive to do life-saving work. And we've already pointed out that that's not necessarily true. The Cuban healthcare system comes out with amazing life-saving innovations on a shoestring fucking budget with no profit motive.
The guy who created the polio vaccine?
He gave it away.
Copyright on it because
he gave
said,
it away.
like,
The guy who synthesized insulin too also gave it away. He didn't say, "I want one day for the disgusting slug daughter of Joe Manchin to be able to buy 16 fucking below ground pools on a recently mountaintop removed hill in fucking West Virginia." But I think a good example that is even more trenchant to how this is a fundamentally incorrect argument. This idea that profit is what saves lives in the medical world is, people might know this or not, but we are on the verge of getting a epidemic of antibiotic resistant bacteria that could like decimate the human population because bacteria have over the last couple of generations grown increasingly resistant to existing antibiotics. Antibiotics are becoming less and less effective at stopping infections.
We talked about this with Lee Phillips. It basically means that, like, not only are most medical, like, surgeries would be impossible without antibiotics, but like very simple things like catheters would also be impossible without antibiotics.
And the pharmaceutical industry is not doing anything about it because there's no money in it.
Nope.
So this is a case where the profit motive is literally incentivizing
apocalypse.
Yes.
Well,
it's incentivizing us allowing everyone to die of antibiotic-resistant bacteria.
Looks like guys who don't Swiffer their floor are looking pretty smart right now.
Last paragraph.
Oh, thank God.
There's a reasonable argument, of course, that Americans should be willing to forsake pharmaceutical research to make current drugs more affordable. But before going that route, everyone needs to be clear on what sort of decision is being made. Otherwise, it's all too likely that cutting drug prices now in the name of easing people's budgets will mean later discovering that we inadvertently sacrificed the life-saving investments of the future.
Okay, we've talked about why that's bullshit and why her premise is wrong, but right there where she says, what does she say? We're doing it in the name of what about the budgets?
Otherwise, it's all too likely that cutting drug prices now in the name of easing people's budgets.
That's it.
There you go.
That's what prescription drug prices mean to Megan McArdle. Oh, I might have to not get that rice enema machine that I was going to get instead of literal life or death for millions of people, which we know for a fact it is. How many fucking times have you seen a story about somebody who rations their fucking insulin until they die because they haven't been getting consistent treatment for their diabetes? That happens all the fucking time, and people never even get prescriptions filled that they have been prescribed for them because they can't afford it, and then they die. We know that people are literally dying over this. It's not about whether or not you're going to and she tips her hand too, and she says, well, it's like a household budget. If you cut here, you might not be able to take that vacation, or you might have to sell that second car. Just that's her baseline, is somebody who's going to fucking going to Aspen and has 3 cars in the fucking garage, and whose household budget is just this vast array of expenses that she can slowly winnow down in the case of an economic downturn, instead of what it is for most people, which is a fucking razor's edge of life and death, and a thing like a spike in the cost of a prescription is why you die. It's why you die, or it's why you can't do something else that's vastly important to your life and that leaves you completely fucked somewhere else.
I mean, again, like, the question that's being posed is not one about budgets. Is, you know, if you like have X, like, how much money would you pay to keep living? How much money would you pay to keep your foot? Like, how much money would you pay, like, to, you know, have a livable quality of life? This is the question that our health insurance and prescription drugs in America in a privatized system asks people every day. To Megan, because I don't think she's, like, I don't know, a human being.
Not really.
I don't know, not really a human.
She's a really strong argument for the David Icke theory.
Yeah. To her, that's a reasonable question, and that you could create a graph actually that could chart out like where your sweet spot is between like living a decent life, living a life that's brutally prescribed by a chronic illness that would otherwise be treatable, but also you want that jet ski or whatever. She probably has like formulas and graphs that she thinks represent like a logical way to figure this out. But at the end of the day, she knows this is all bullshit, but she knows it's her job to write it and put her name on it. And they just want real estate in a newspaper where someone will say,
arguing on their behalf.
Well, someone will just say, hey, affordable drugs that save your life or the lives of people you know and love. That might sound good, but what if it weren't?
Yeah. And the thing is that, and whenever she's doing this, she's invoking a real argument, and it is a kind of a straw man thing. And I think she could argue, well, when you talk about the way people talk about things, they really only emphasize the positives and not the trade-offs. It's like, yeah, that's what literally everyone does in politics. You're acting like that's some sort of cheating demagoguery when leftists do it. Literally everyone fucking does that. But yes, of course there are fucking cost benefit. Of course there's trade-offs. There have to be for everything. But her assumption is whatever we do, the trade-offs, they're all in the context where there are these disgusting, fat, blood-filled tick parasites who are sucking off everyone else so that their kids can go to clown college. Their profits are sacrosanct. Like whatever we're doing in terms of trading off a bloated, disgusting corporate sector of capitalist profiteers, that's built in. That can't go anywhere. Like Joe Manchin, shithead daughter, all the Sacklers, they have to be kept whole. They cannot lose their standard of living. They cannot lose their 15th yacht.
Not even their standard of living. They can't even take a minor haircut.
Nothing. They can't lose anything.
Yeah.
And that, I just think that's a very faulty assumption, to say the least. And it's funny how she doesn't, and she never really puts it that way, of course, because nobody would accept it. But like, look at that article. She's talking about the incentive to produce. Well, who makes the money? It's not the guys who make the fucking disease-changing drugs. It's the guys who sell them. It's the fucking companies that sell them that make the money. The people who actually do the life-saving research, they cannot be motivated by the thought of, oh my God, I'm going to be a billionaire, because they never become billionaires. Their fucking bosses do.
And like so much of like economic theory, like the way, I mean, like when I say Megan isn't human, I would say like most of the economics profession, like as a discipline, is also deeply inhuman, in that it's this weird overlap with like evolutionary biology where they assume individual human beings are these like just rational computing machines that are always making decisions based on their like genetic outcome, and they generally they think like altruism generally doesn't exist, or it only extends so far as like your immediate blood group, and that everyone is capable of making these choices like a computer, like nodes and kind of an algorithm, which just based on any human experience outside of the realm of economics is untrue.
Yes.
And here's the thing, economics creates that world by which we literally are all competing with one another to fucking my getting prescription drugs comes at the expense of everyone else, or like things like that, where it makes this robotic, inhuman world. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
And here's the other way that it's bullshit. The assumption there is everyone is motivated by personal interest, and not even that, specifically financial
capitalist financial interest, investment.
And that's why people create life-saving drugs. Well, as we've said, the people who actually create life-saving drugs are scientists and doctors, and I can say categorically, they are not motivated by becoming billionaires. Why? Because they became scientists instead of becoming pharmaceutical executives. If they cared about money, they wouldn't have that job. They would have the job in the fucking C-suites. So clearly there are people in the world who want to help other people. And capitalism exists. It's supposed to be the thing that directs resources, right? Like efficiently. That's the argument of capitalism. Yeah. It's the most efficient way to direct resources. And that might have some validity in certain like consumer markets, but in something as vital and as inelastic as fucking healthcare and medicine, it's simply not true. We know where the resources should go. We know what we need to do. And we have people who want to work on those things. We could just direct the money that way. We do not need this parasitic class directing the money in a way that guarantees that they are always compensated, and that people, because of that, die, because you create the artificial scarcity of elevated price points to limit the number of people who can access the drug.
I would say at the end of the day, economics, like as a discipline, is largely created and maintained by people who hate humanity.
Mm-hmm.
They have a fundamental contempt for human beings or humanity as a concept. And like they wish to exist only as individuals in competition, ruthless competition with everyone else.